After a heated weekend of racing in Darwin only a few weeks ago, Supercars are back in the sunshine for the next round of the championship on the streets of Townsville. There's a lot of interest in the racing ahead thanks to SVG's debut win in the NASCAR series and a parity tweak to the Gen 3 Mustang that could see the racing closer than ever. I'm here to cover all that and much more as part of my round 6 preview for the Supercars Championship. Our battleground this weekend is the Repco Street Circuit, located about 15 hours drive north of Queensland's capital city in Brisbane, and this location is a bit of a personal favourite of mine. I think it's something of a modern classic. It's a really exciting track that officially is a street circuit, but it's actually more of a hybrid because there are some purpose-built sections that offer a great combination of the thrill and danger of a street circuit, but also the overtaking opportunities of a more traditional track. A lap around this place is about 2.86 kilometers or 1.77 miles, featuring 13 turns in a clockwise direction, and I would say the risk rating around Townsville is medium. The lap kicks off with a long run to the first major braking zone, taking you through a gentle right-hander that can actually be a bit of a handful on lap 1, or if you're in a battle pack later in the race. But then you go down to turn 2, a major overtaking opportunity with a nice wide entry to the corner, and then things tighten up as you head down to turn 3, a 90-degree right that has seen plenty of drama over the years. After that, you enter the more permanent section of the track that features some nice flowing corners that gradually tighten up as you get down towards a tight chicane about the 2/3 point of the lap. That flows into turn 9, which you don't really notice, but turn 10 will definitely get your attention. A high-speed right-hander that takes you down to the next big overtaking opportunity at 11. That also flows into turn 12 before you reach the final corner at 13, where traction on the exit is a big factor. If you're heading trackside or are just watching Supercars around Townsville for the very first time, I would say there are 5 main spots to watch. The first is down at turn 2, not only because it's a key overtaking location, but on lap 1 it's got a really wide entry but a very tight exit, and it can be quite entertaining to see the Supercars try and funnel through there. After that, you've got turn 3, which is a risky overtaking location, but we do see moves executed well here, but it's very tight. So if it goes wrong, it's a bit of a blind corner and there's plenty of potential for pile-ups. After that, we have turn 10. I've already alluded that it's a wild corner, and I'm really curious to see how the cars behave through here with the new Gen 3 vehicles that have less downforce than previous years, and thanks to the bumps through turn 10, this one could be sketchy. After that, you've got the double hairpin sequence. I've kind of put these two together because you can actually see the battles continue through here. You often see dive bombs down at turn 11, side-by-side action through turn 12, and then some jostling for position into that final corner. It's a great little circuit with plenty of action. Last time we were here, it was a double victory for Shane van Gisbergen, but it was really entertaining on both days. Race 1 on the Saturday was probably the tamer of the two that saw SVG hunting Will Davidson down in the dying laps, ultimately getting past with a few to go. And then race 2 on the Saturday kicked off with a major, or a potential major incident, as Scott Pye, who qualified really well, got spun at turn 3 on the opening lap and was very lucky not to be collected by the field as they charged through. Race 2 ended in major controversy though, as SVG was spun while leading the race at the final turn on the final lap by Anton De Pasquale. Anton tried to redress the situation, knowing that the move didn't really fall in his favour, but SVG did not have it. He pushed Anton over the line, knowing that the stewards would likely intervene with a penalty. It was heated after that one. Let's turn our attention to 2023, and the format this weekend kicks off on Friday for Supercars with practice 1 and 2. On Saturday, we're going to have qualifying to set the grid up to 10th position, and then a top 10 shootout where each of the top 10 qualifiers will go out for a single hot lap to try and get as high up the grid as possible. After that, we have our first 250-kilometer race Saturday afternoon, and I hope you like the look of that format because we do it all over again on the Sunday. Supercars run a few different formats throughout the year, but this one is one of my personal favorites. I feel like the 250k long races are a real sweet spot. They're not too long, but they're still long enough for a real storyline to emerge, for strategy to play a role, for fuel to be a factor, and plenty of surprises to happen along the way. As for the weather, it's going to be partly cloudy all 3 days with the temperatures hovering around the mid 20 degrees Celsius mark. Alright, let's catch up on the key headlines since the last round of racing. Supercars were rumored to be looking to buy one of the racing entitlement contracts, or the RECs. Now, these are essentially things the teams purchase to run a car on the grid as a REC per vehicle, so them looking to take one of them off the market was quite a surprise, because a lot of Supercars fans, myself included, want to see the grid expand, so the thought of it shrinking was a bit of a surprise. Now, apparently they're looking to take one off the market to bring the grid down to 24 vehicles, because apparently that helps with the freight situation, which could suggest on a positive note that we should be heading to New Zealand or potentially Singapore as well in 2024. But that's an interesting one. I might dive into that in a dedicated video soon. Obviously, the key headline though in recent days has been Shane Van Gisbergen winning his debut NASCAR race. A fantastic story. And a quick side note as well, thanks for all the support on that video that I put up earlier this week. Really appreciate it. And on that, Triple Eight have actually said they are open to releasing SVG from his contract early if he does want to go stateside next year. Now, SVG is officially under contract to race in Supercars next year in 2024 full time, but it sounds like that plan could change if SVG wants it to. And then finally, some other drivers have been racing in other parts of the world as well. Chaz Mostert and Anton De Pasquale have competed in the 24 Hours of Spa, with Mostert actually picking up a class victory alongside his teammates. Hopefully, I haven't missed any of the other drivers racing overseas. The biggest news going into this weekend though has to be the parity adjustment for the Mustang. Now, I want to do a quick recap on parity, or at least my understanding of it, and there's loads of different angles you can take with it for anyone that's new to Supercars. So in Supercars, the cars are meant to be equal. We've got the Camaro and the Mustang. They're the only two vehicles that are on the grid. Now, despite having different engines and body shapes, Supercars work really hard to make sure they are equal in engine and aerodynamic performance, which is something of a dark art when you are dealing with different engine configurations and fundamentally different body shapes. Now, they work really, really hard to get these vehicles on points, but it has been suggested throughout this year so far that the Mustang isn't up to scratch. After Darwin, things really boiled over with the Ford teams, understandably getting quite frustrated. They didn't have equal machinery, at least they felt that way. So Supercars have gone away, they've reevaluated the vehicles, and going into Townsville, there is a aerodynamic adjustment for the Mustang, which should give it a bit more rear downforce. So I'm really curious to see if that closes things up, because it's been something of a Camaro fest so far. It's a very political topic, parity, but fingers crossed the changes result in really exciting racing this weekend. Alright, now that I've probably detonated the comments section, let's talk about some other footnotes as we head into this round of racing. First one here, I'm really curious to see how SVG reacclimatizes. He's going to be back in a supercar less than a week after the NASCAR race, so really curious to see how he goes, especially given that SVG hasn't really fallen in love with the Gen 3 cars so far this year. My second footnote is that Townsville, will it be back on form? This is something of a personal opinion, but I feel like the event has been on the quieter side since COVID-19, so fingers crossed it's back in full flight this weekend with strong crowds and some entertainment both on and off the track. And finally, some of the Supercars events have free digital event guides. Townsville is one of those, so I'll be sure to link that down in the comments below. And if you are new to Supercars or the Townsville Street Circuit specifically, I'll link a couple of other videos as well that give you a bit of an insight to the track and some of the great moments that have happened here over the years. Alrighty, let's start rounding things up with my predictions. Now, as always, these are just a bit of fun, but that said, I had some severe jinx guilt at the last event in Darwin because I predicted another Gen 3 fire, thinking it would be a minor, bit of bodywork or some brakes lighting up. No, instead, we had a huge fuel fire for Cameron Waters while he was leading the first race of the weekend. So my first prediction aims to right that wrong, and I'm going to predict that Cameron Waters wins a race this weekend. Now, I think there's actually a bit of logic to this as well. Waters has been the most consistently strong Ford driver so far this season, so the fact that Mustang has now had a parity tweak and it should have a bit more downforce at the rear, you've got to think he's got to be best positioned to capitalize on that. My second prediction is that Shane Van Gisbergen will struggle, and by struggle I mean he won't get a podium this weekend. Now, Gen 3 has been interesting for SVG. He's either really been on it at a few rounds or really off it. So it's really 50-50 on what we're going to have this weekend. But I'm just curious, with being in a NASCAR, a completely different vehicle over recent days, and the travel back to Australia so soon, I'm just feeling that he might struggle a little bit more, at least by his very high standards. And my final prediction is a crash for a Supercars driver at turn 10. I've already alluded to the fact this is a hairy corner, and we've seen plenty of incidents in support categories through here over the years, but Supercars itself has actually been pretty quiet at this point of the racetrack, other than some exciting grazes against the wall. But with Gen 3 having substantially less downforce than the Gen 2 machines they last had here, I'm expecting this corner will be even more of a challenge, and we might see a car in the wall either through a mistake in qualifying as the tyres wear down through the race, or during a battle as the car set themselves up for the following hairpin. Okay, let's look at some of your predictions. First one here from Supercars Mabini saying SVG to win both races. Now I want to bring this one up because, as I said, it can be 50-50. I think we're either going to have gears absolutely on form this weekend and hitting it out of the park, or potentially struggling. Mabini is predicting the more positive of the two there. There's a few other predictions in here. The one I want to shout out though is Mostert getting a top 5 in both races. That would be a good bounce back for Walkinshaw and Andretti United. Weststar94 also chose to play with fire, mentioning the P word like myself, saying long shot here, but Ford will finally win a race and all this talk about parity will stop. Now, bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment here, I reckon, but it's an interesting situation because if Ford don't win this weekend, there will be calls that the change wasn't enough and that more needs to be done to bring that Mustang up in its competitiveness. If Ford do win, the Chevy camp chances are going to be saying that the changes were too much. No matter what happens, you just know there's going to be talk about parity even after this weekend. I think it's going to take a few more rounds yet for the form guide to really emerge, and hopefully we are in a sweet spot, because as dramatic as parity is and all the politics and media it kicks up, I do just prefer to have this in the background sorted and everyone be confident on where the cars are at, so we can just focus on some amazing, good, hard racing. And finally, Jeremy here predicting an Erebus 1-2 in at least one of the races, and I think this would be a really important result for the Erebus team. They had a bit of dip in performance in Darwin, not catastrophic, but not their usual strong form in 2023, and as we start looking towards the back half of the championship, they're going to be looking to build that momentum again. One of the great things about Supercars events is that you often see good variety in the support categories, and this weekend is no different. We have the Dunlop series, which is the development series for Supercars. It's sort of the step below that top tier. That features previous Supercars from past years, and it has both Super 2, which is the faster of them, and Super 3, which are a little bit older but still quite close on performance. And in fact, they're so close that if you've got a strong driver in Super 3, they can be up there mixing it with the Super 2 guys. Normally, really exciting racing there. We've got Toyota Gazoo Racing 86s. These are converted road cars. These are sort of really grassroots motorsport. I love watching these things as well. All about flowing and using momentum to keep the lap speed up. And then Aussie racing cars, I call these things the Buzzbots. They are tiny little race cars that put on amazing shows and often have some great slipstream in battles. And finally, if you want a bit of downforce in your life, we've also got the Porsche Carrera Cup. Finishing up, taking a look at the championship standings, it is tight at the top. Brody Kostecki continues to lead the way for Erebus with a narrow margin over his teammate in Will Brown. The Red Bull boys are hot on their heels with Brock Feeney in third, SVG in fourth, and then we have the first Ford on the leaderboard, Chaz Mostert in fifth, Andre Heingartner sixth, Cam Waters in seventh, who would probably be higher if it hadn't been for some unlucky incidents this year. Something of an underdog in Jack LeBroff picking up his second victory in Supercars at the last event, and Will Davidson ninth with Davey Reynolds in 10th. And in the team's championship, we have something of a two-horse race emerging here between Erebus and Red Bull Racing. Brad Jones Racing Racing keeps surprising me when I see them up there in third, but that's a good result for them so far this year. Walkinshaw Andretti United there in fourth, and Shell v Power Racing in fifth. But that will bring my Townsville preview to an end. Thank you for your patience. This video has come out a bit later than I planned after having to record the SVG video after he won in NASCAR. But if you are new to Supercars and tuning in for the first time this weekend, I hope this video has been useful. If you have any questions ahead of the weekend about Supercars, if you haven't really watched it before, be sure to drop a comment down below. I'll try to help you out. I'm sure a few others in the community will as well. On the topic of comments, thank you so much for keeping it clean recently. I was really worried with parity kicking off that things would get nasty, but so far people have been really good. So thank you for that. Please continue to treat people like your trackside, and I will see you guys back in my Townsville review where I'll discuss all the racing action that goes down this weekend.